with L. Nathan Hare. The phone lines are now open at 837-1112, and we encourage your questions and comments. Now, without further ado, here's your host, L. Nathan Hare.
All right, here we go, living now, living right now. This is L. Nathan Hare, your host here for this next hour at WFO Power 96.5 FM on your dial. Our principal sponsor, of course, the Community Action Organization of Western New York, still fighting the war on poverty, now in our 53rd year. Hopefully, you all have gotten your tickets to the annual dinner, which is going to be this Friday. It's going to actually not be a dinner this year. It's going to be a luncheon. It'll be taking place from 11:30 to 2 o'clock this Friday, June 8th. It'll be at the Buffalo Convention Center. And we have Kathy Hochul, who is going to be our keynote speaker, Lieutenant Governor for New York State. And hopefully you will all have an opportunity to be able to hear her thoughts about where we're going as a state, what the implications are of the tax law, how that might affect us as individuals, how it might affect us as a state in terms of our ability to provide a safety net that works for the citizens in our state. So hopefully you'll have a chance to be there. It's only $50 to attend the luncheon. I know you see most of these affairs, they want, $150, $100, and so on, but we've kept ours at this $50 level, for all but one of the 53 years in our existence. So hopefully you'll have a chance to come. I want to welcome, you want to come, the number again is 881-5150. That's 881-5150. You want to ask for Carrie Soccer or Yvonne Hairston. That's Carrie Soccer or Yvonne Hairston, and they will give you information about your tickets and tables and all of that sort of stuff. So I want to welcome all of you again to this hour of insight, introspection, and interpretation of facts, events, and trends affecting you right here and right now in Buffalo and the Western New York community, and in fact, connecting you to communities all across the country. Each week, we focus on things we think will be of interest to you, which will serve to motivate you and serve to connect you to the broader issues that affect our communities here in Western New York. Now, today's program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. I hope that you will. Our number here again is 837-1112. That's 837-1112. And so I want to kind of finish up a bit on the oral literacy discussion that we had last week. There were a lot of comments that we received on our Facebook live internet feed. We have Emmanuel Radford here, who is doing the live streaming of our program. If you have access to your computer or a handheld device, you can type in Facebook and then type in Living Now. Our program will come up. You'll actually be able to see us talking, on the air. And if you have any questions, any observations, or any concerns, you can type them in, and we'll respond to as many of them as we can during the course of the program. So in talking about this oral literacy issue, and then I want to get into a discussion about another alternative, because we always want to talk about solutions. So in the second half of the program, I want to talk about a new school model. It's not that new, because it was actually talked about during the Obama administration. It was being promoted during the Obama administration, called Pathways in Technology Early High School. And I'll explain to you what that's all about. And if I have a chance, I'll talk to you about what schools have to do if they're going to be effective in getting students ready for college or for a good vocational training certification program once they finish high school. But in terms of the problems that poor oral literacy produces in children, children who enter schools with poor skills in listening, speaking, and or phonological processing. That's, in other words, their ability to decode words so that they can follow what the words, how to say, and what's being said. Children may enter with poor skills in these areas. Children with poor listening and speaking skills are referred to as having a language impairment, and most of them will also have poor phonological processing abilities. Phonological is your ability to figure out how the words go together to create meaning. So the fact that you can say the word, that's nice. I'm glad you can say the words, right? But if you don't know how the words come together to mean something, you're still in La La Land. You know what I mean? It's like you're in a space where things are being done around you and you don't understand what's being done. So you either find a way to make yourself understand, or you tune out. You just get distracted and start doing something else. And then you, Emmanuel, as a teacher, would call that child ADHD or say he has an anxiety disorder and so on. So current estimates are that about 12% of children who are entering public schools in the United States have a language impairment. These are children who are there are children who are sufficiently competent in listening and talking to be viewed as normal in this regard, but for whom phonological processing performance remains poor. In other words, you have children who can speak, you can talk to them, they seem like they're talking back to you, like you're able to communicate, with them, but the child has poor phonological reasoning ability, meaning the child is not able to take the words that you are saying and put them together and get sense out of what it is that you are saying. So they're able to hear the words that you say, they can repeat the words that you say, and so they may sound like they have a decent speaking and oral literacy, but in fact they don't. And so that has to be identified and that has to be corrected in a child as early as you possibly can. At school entry, these children may be viewed as being at risk for reading disorder. Reading disorder is customarily defined as poor reading achievement occurring after sufficient opportunity to learn to read. Now, I get that reading disorder, Emmanuel, but I hate that description, because it means that you have to wait a long time until you see that the child is not reading at age appropriate levels or at grade level, and then that's when you begin to react. Well, the child might be in the second or third grade by then. They're 3 or 4 years behind, in terms of life development. I don't like that. My position is, if you can determine that a child has poor oral literacy, and for certain if you have poor oral literacy, you're going to have poor phonological reasoning, because you need oral literacy to have decent phonological reasoning. So if you connect that as being going on with a student at 4 or 5 years old, you got to jump on that right then and there. You can't wait until some Common Core test comes up 3 or 4 years from now. You got to do that right then and there. And it may mean that the way kindergarten is taught may have to be changed. I take the position that taking all of that time, teaching people colors and, shapes, it's cute. I mean, I get that, wow, that's a triangle. I get that, and sit over here, sit on your mat. It's time to eat, it's time to go to recess. Kindergarten all day is recess. That's all you do in kindergarten is recess. My position is that, and I'm being a bit facetious, I'm minimizing, what gets done in kindergarten, but I'm trying to help us to understand the structure of what is being done in kindergarten classrooms. And what I'm suggesting is that we have to change that structure. Now, it doesn't mean that you sit here and read, Shakespeare, to a 4 or 5 year old child. Doesn't mean that. It means that you have to structure activities that you engage in with the child that require the child to keep increasing their ability to use words. And as they increase their ability to use words, you help them to understand not only what the words mean, but how the sense of how you put those words together, how that makes sense, so that the child starts to get the process of how to decode what is meant by what's being said. And you have to do this all the time, even if you have to keep using, dozens of different physical, lessons that you use to try to get the, games and things you use to try to get the child to begin to process that way. But you got to focus on that in kindergarten. That's got to be immediate. And in Head Start, we have to do that in our Head Start programs. And we'll talk a little bit about an initiative that we're adopting. We're actually acquiring something called Hatch tablets for our kids that are 3 and 4 years old. The Hatch tablets not only allow you to teach more words to a child, allow you to be able to teach the child to become a pre-reader. Some will become actually good readers before they get to kindergarten. But in addition to that, you can track what you've been doing with the child and how the child is responding to the education that you're giving the child. You can actually measure the child's growth. And that way you know what you're getting done, not just a year from now, but you know class to class, you know hour to hour. This is what I'm getting done with this individual child, which allows you to make adjustments, individual adjustments in what you're doing for that child so that every child masters everything. Emmanuel, I know I say this all the time. I know it's like a broken record, but if I'm paying $25,000 a year, okay, to teach you certain things, I'm not going to be satisfied unless you've learned those things. Why am I spending this money if I'm not getting what I'm paying for? Now, I'm not mad if you tell me that you can't do it. You know what I mean? You and your union associations or whatever it is you're involved with, you tell me that you can't do it, it's too hard. It's okay. I'm not mad that you tell me you can't do the job. But I need for you to understand, if you can't do the job, I'm going to do the same thing for you that I would do with anybody else who can't do their job. I'm going to let you go and let you find something that's less troubling for you. And I'm going to find somebody who can do the job, because the job clearly can be done. It clearly can be done. They're teaching Japanese children a second language when they're 2 years old. You cannot tell me that Japanese children are more biologically sound than African American children. I mean, we're all the same stuff. So it clearly is possible to teach children at a much earlier stage than we're teaching them. You just have to be passionately committed to getting it done. And if you are not passionately committed to getting it done, it is okay. I'm not mad. I'm not. I'm glad that you told me that you're not passionately committed to getting it done, because I need people to work for us who are passionately committed to do it. So you informing me allows me to be able to do correct things, like letting you go and opening up a sign, putting up a sign saying I got an opening for a person who's passionately committed to doing this for these children. So this is just so extremely important. When they talk about somebody having a reading disorder, it's often diagnosed after 2 or 3 years of reading instruction. That's the research. In other words, if you are not demonstrating reading competence by the 3rd grade, you are likely to be identified as having a reading disorder, and you become a candidate for going into special education. Who on earth wants their child to go into special education in the first place? Now, Emmanuel, you don't remember this because you took a long time to get to the planet, right? But when I was a child, special education was for people that were deaf, people that were blind, people that were missing an arm, people that had some kind of, serious, infirmity and whatnot, right? Special education wasn't for normal kids who can play basketball, who can play football, who knew how to figure out plays. They just didn't bother to read. That wasn't what special education was about. Those kids who weren't learning well enough, but had the cognitive ability to do everything, we just kept those kids after school, right? They just kept working with those kids. They called their parents up. Excuse me, ma'am, your child is not reading the way that your child should be reading at 6 years old. So we're going to have to do some extra work to get your child up to speed. Because being a person who is 6 years old who can't read at a 1st grade level is unacceptable, in this school. Whose parent is going to object? Name a single parent on earth that would object to that, right? So it just seems to me that this is an exercise of will. Either you want to do it or you don't. If you try to turn education into an industrial process, like you're making machinery, in an assembly shop, you can't do education that way. You can't say we're going to do this much of this, this week of this year, this much of this, and this other week of this year, and so on. You can't do education that way. You have to be focused on what the outcome is that you're trying to get to with the child. And then you have to be able to see whether or not the child is making satisfactory progress to get to that, to those goals. And if the child isn't, you have to intervene right then and there. If you have to hire other people to do it because you can't do it in the structure of how you're doing your kindergarten or 1st grade or whatever class, then you have to hire other people to get it done. That's what a response to intervention is all about. We have RTI instructors in every single school in the Buffalo Public School District. What are we doing? Why are we hiring people to do things and then we don't let them do what it is that we hire them to do? This is just nuts, right? Estimates of the prevalence of reading disorder among school-age children typically range from 10 to 18%. In other words, 1 out of 10, maybe as many as 1 out of 7 of all of the children that we have in our public school systems have a reading disorder, not a reading delay, a reading disorder. These are children who don't process reading well at all. Well, how are you going to reach competence in this society if you can't read well? How are you going to learn if you can't read well? You can't be sitting around waiting on somebody to orally tell you, everything that you need to know. You can't teach a society that way. Children have to be able to read in order to become self-learners. If they don't become self-learners, how do you transform them into the competent individuals they have to be when they're going to become adults? You can't get that done. And it seems to me, if you know that, I'm not saying something to you all that you don't know, right? So if you know that, why aren't we organizing ourselves to accomplish what we know absolutely must be accomplished with every single child? Okay, and I get that teaching Puerto Rican studies and Vietnamese history and how urns were developed in Greece, and I get that those are, in things that you are all interested in, right? I need for you to learn how to read. I need for you to learn how to process words. I need for you to be able to become a person who can communicate successfully yourself, right? That's what I think has to get done. I know we have a caller hanging on, so let me grab that call real quick before I get into another aspect of our subject. Hi, caller, are you there?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Hare.
Hi, Mother Dora. How you doing?
Well, I'm a little tired as usual. I'm still strolling along, but I'm still here. That's a blessing.
There you go.
Yes. As I was listening to you talk about our children and their learning and reading, one of the things I find very disturbing is this ongoing violence in the community. In the past 7 days, we have had 11 shootings and 3 murders in our community. And I can't help but wonder how all of this violence is affecting our children in school and their ability to learn.
Yep.
And one of the things I don't hear much about is grief counselors being called in. Because, in the suburbs, if they just have one incident of violence, they immediately call in the grief counselors, or they say the grief counselors are available for the children if they need them.
Yep.
I've been posting this on Facebook. I've gotten a lot of response from people because the violence, in my opinion, has to impact our children mentally and emotionally because some of the people being shot and murdered might be a family member or a close friend. And it seems like nothing is really being done. No one is being arrested. And it's a very concerning thing. I'm deeply concerned about it. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. I really feel that it has to have some type of impact. When I was teaching, Mr. Hare, I integrated into my regular program conflict resolution because I felt that young people needed to have some understanding and some alternatives to violence. And it's really not, because some of those people who were shot in the past 7 days, some of them were not youth. Some of them were older. So I really feel that as a community, we need conflict resolution programs in our churches, in our community centers, and not only for our young people, but for adults as well, because I don't think people know how to solve problems peacefully. So I think learning can take place if we have a more peaceful, nonviolent community. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, and I'll hang up and listen to any remarks that you might have. But this is a real concern.
Yeah, I'm absolutely
Thank
with
you
you
so much.
All right. Thank you, Mother Doyle. That's a great insight because children's learning is interrupted by traumatic events that take place in their lives. You have to understand, when you're 4 or 5 years old, you've only been on the planet for 4 or 5 years. And out of that time, you've only been awake for maybe 2 years, right? Where you actually had some sense of yourself and what's going on. And so a child needs to feel confident. We're going to take a break in just a second. A child needs to feel confident that there is a set of people cornered or centered around their parents who will stand between them and death. What I mean by that is children will risk, they will try anything, because they're so certain that their parents will get there before death comes to get them. Their parents are going to be, if the parents have to take the death themselves, they just know that their parents are going to do everything humanly possible to defend their lives and their interests. If you don't have that sense of assurance, where does your confidence come from? So you would wind up being an insecure child. So what's happening is we have allowed this society, or we've allowed America to breed in many quarters of this society a sense of rampant, continuing insecurity. When you don't think that going to school is safe, out of all the places on earth, when I get to school where there's just kids, I'm not safe there. You actually target me for murder because I'm a kid. That's what you're doing. I mean, how does that make you feel as a child, right? If you and your community can't play in the streets in your community, hang out on people's porches, play in the park, a basket hung up on a tree, in your community, if you can't feel confident as a child that you can be a child in your community, that has to erode your sense of security. And if your sense of security is being eroded, it means that your thoughts are constantly returning to the thing that makes you feel insecure. While your thoughts are focused that way, you're not learning other things. It's like you've got something that's just dominating your mind and you're not able to pay attention to other things. That also helps children to lose ground. And then if you do things with the child in the classroom that signify to the child that you don't like the child, that you don't care, or you think the child is dumb and is not worthy of your attention and so on, that also then, cycles around that traumatic memory that's in the child's mind, and it erodes the child's ability to stay focused on what you're trying to get done. Hopefully you're trying to get something done in your classroom. And it has the child become more self-focused rather than focused on the process of instruction and community learning that should be taking place inside the classroom. So I think Mother Doyle is right on the money, on that. So we'll talk about that in other parts of the show. But let's take our first break, and then we'll get back into our subject. So if you all stick with us, we will see you inside of the break here at Living Right Now.
Do you want to increase your home's value? Do you want to lower your energy bills? Are you in need of affordable financing for your next home improvement project? The CAO Home Improvement Resource Program can help. Just come to their monthly HIRP orientation session every second Wednesday of the month at 564 Dodge Street, Building 400. HIRP staff will help identify the resources you need to get financed, and they'll even help you with completing your application. You won't know what you qualify for until you call them today at 881-6543. That's 881-6543. Learn about all the home improvement programs you may be eligible for and ask about the affordable financing program that can help turn your house into your dream home. Call 881-6543 for more info. It's the Home Improvement Resource Program, restoring value to neighborhoods across Erie County, one house at a time. Brought to you by the Community Action Organization of Erie County.
All right, welcome back to Living Now here at WFO 96.5, Power 96.5 FM on your dial. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with our Manuel Radford, who's doing the live streaming of the program. And we were just talking through this whole issue of reading disorders and how reading disorders are rooted in language impairment. And language impairment simply means that you don't know the number of words, or you're significantly off the rails in terms of knowing the number of words you should know at your particular stage in life. So when a child gets to kindergarten, just so you understand what we're talking about, it takes a minimum of 3,000 words to teach kindergarten. They've actually studied kindergarten classes. Somebody's actually taped, kindergarten classes. These studies were done out of West Virginia University. And what they found was they studied 17 different classrooms in different parts of states that were close to West Virginia. And what they found was that when you went through these tapes and you broke up the words, some classes the teacher used as many as 5,000 words, but none of the classrooms used less than 3,000 words. So if you're a child and you only know 500 or 600 words, the likelihood is 80% of what's being said, not only did you not understand the word, you didn't even understand that it was a word that was being said. So when noises take place around you, just think right now as you're sitting where you are, there are noises that are taking place in your house. There are noises that are taking place outside your house in your community. And you don't react to those noises because they don't make any kind of a demand on you. There's no significance of the noise to you. Well, that's what's happening. You're not learning anything from the noises because you're not paying any attention to them. Well, think about a child sitting in a classroom and somebody's talking, and 80% of what the person is saying, they don't even know that it was a word. As far as they're concerned, the person could be grunting, and so on, right? And so the child isn't learning from those other words that are being said. The consequence of that is the children who have words, they're getting the gist of what's being said by that teacher, and they're integrating that into their thought process, and they're learning from those words. The child who doesn't have words is not learning from those words, and every single day, that child with the language impairment is moving further and further away from the other children in that class, what I call the able children, the language and able children in that class. That is going to manifest itself in insidious ways over the course of time. So in terms of the research, in talking about this relationship between spoken language development, reading development, and social development, this has been explored by several researchers in an effort to determine the extent to which these problems are associated with each other and the bases for these relationships. The prominent research questions have been concerned with the extent to which aspects of early language status are predictive of later reading and behavioral problems, and what the possible bases might be for these relationships. Two hypotheses have occurred. And you have to work with me on this, Emmanuel, because you're probably going to say, what? So the first one is the more logical one. It says one hypothesis is that the associations between spoken language and later outcomes are causal. In other words, if you have poor oral literacy, you are likely to have poor reading development, reading disorder. And if you have poor reading disorder, you're going to have poor phonological, the ability to decode words and how words create meaning when they're strung together into a sequence. You're going to have problems with that. And as a consequence of that, you are going to have a learning impairment. You are going to become learning delayed. And if you don't correct being learning delayed early enough, you're going to reach a point where you're going to get into a grade where your lack of ability to process words will prevent you from being able to learn what they're teaching in the third grade. Most of it you're not going to be able to access because you don't have enough words. By the time you get to the third grade, you probably should know something like 20, 25,000 words. You may still be at 800, 1,000 words. So what's being talked about in your third grade class, you're not grasping that at all. You're just not getting it. As a consequence, you're becoming a different child. And what happens to the different children in our classrooms? You all been in America long as I have. If you're a different child in the classroom, they put you into the instruction for the different. They call it special ed. That's what that means, right? That's the instruction for the different. And when you go into the instruction for the different, the likelihood is they're going to do things just to keep you from being a problem, with the education system, as opposed to being able to make a cognitive, individualized campaign to correct, what may be wrong in your learning development. The other hypothesis, which you just have to work with me on, it says that the association of language and reading problems with behavior problems may rest on a common underlying condition, such as a neural maturational delay that results in poor achievement in both domains, and those domains being spoken language development and reading development. Now, think about that for a second. That's like saying that the reason why we're not successful in educating these children is because the children's fathers were in jail. The fathers didn't stay with their mothers. That's why we're not getting it done. They live in a poor community. That's why we're not getting it done. You're poor yourself. That's why we're not getting it done, right? And, we come up with all of these different external reasons for why we're not being successful in educating these children, right? That is what I see going on in this whole education reform movement. In fact, you will even hear people talk about one of the ways they're attacking the lack of education development of children is trying to attack the social and economic problems in the communities that the children are living in. We have to correct housing patterns and have less segregation in housing. That will solve the problem. The problem is you're putting the emphasis on what you need to do. I'm not saying all those things don't need to get done at some level, but you're putting the emphasis on what needs to be done to successfully educate the child on something external to the education process and external to the people who are supposed to be doing the educating of the child. I think that that's a weak way. I'm not saying that there's no absolute research that supports, some consequences of, economic and social phenomena affecting the education of a child. But I am saying that regardless of what phenomena is going on around the child, you can educate every single child. Okay? I mean, we grew up in the projects. Everything was poor. We had all the issues that people are talking about. People got educated. So you can't say that the social phenomena is the reason why you're not educating the child. That may be a factor, but it may not be an important factor. We have a caller hanging on right now. Let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you there?
Good morning, Nathan. My son attended special education, as I told you, because the teacher said he was just too rambunctious and was very happy to get rid of him. And you're right. Once they get into special education, you can't get them out. They never catch up. I do want to say I have spoken with somebody in education last week and was a little disturbed on what I had heard. And I think part of the problem is that they're teaching evolution, and there's no room for creation, and that everybody is evolving from lower life forms. We crawled out of the sea and we became a mammal, and then from mammals we became primates, and then from primates we developed into what we are today. So I think that part of the problem is the line of thought that is being put into our children subliminally is that we're nothing more than just animals, which is one of the reasons why they are pushing reproductive rights the way that they are, and there's nobody there to respond to it. So I will hang up and listen to the rest of what you have to say, but I think the problem is set up so that our kids do fail, and I don't quite know what the motive for that is, but the more I watch, the more I learn, the more I take in, the more I realize just how corrupt the system truly is. So God bless you, Nathan. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, Bob. One of the things that I think we have to wrap our minds around, those of us that are older remember a different era, a different type of educational consensus about what it was you were trying to get done. And within that consensus that we used to have in the 50s and the 60s, there was the idea that there was a social contract amongst all of us, that life was valued above just about everything. There was nothing more important than life itself, that there was a spiritual, religious context that demanded that all of us are all in for all of our children all the time, that providing for each other's welfare was a part of what we were doing as the basic way that we worked with each other in this society. And it seems like a lot of that rootedness, that basic moral sort of, I hate calling it a cosmological context, but there is a certain sort of framing of how we saw each other, how we saw the world, that prioritized children, prioritized spaces that children were in, that pregnant women were in, that older people were in. There was a certain consensus about all of that. And it seems like we've lost a lot of that consensus. And to an extent, so I can't get into the creation piece, but I can accept the ideation that if you don't have a generally accepted foundation that anticipates that everybody is a human being, everybody has the ability to be a highly moral individual, everybody has the capacity to grow into all possible potential, and that we do everything that we can as a society working together to develop that potential in our young. If you don't have that, then it sets in motion the idea that there are some who just are better at growing up into being effective adults and some who are not. And we just kind of write that off, right, as if it's a function of statistics. And this is not a function of statistics. These are human beings. You have to win every single time, not some of the time. And I guess that's the main point that I want to get to on that. You have to win every single time. So when we talk about the research results, investigators that examine the reading and psychological outcomes of children with language impairment in the early school years, several studies have reported poor reading achievement and higher rates of reading disorder in children with language impairments. In other words, poor oral literacy. It's not rocket science, okay? I mean, we do studies to tell us what we already know. You know that if you have poor oral literacy, you're going to have poor reading development, period. So if you want to solve the reading issue, solve the oral literacy issue. It's... Come on now, why are we acting like we don't have to hire Gary Orfield to come here and tell us that? I mean, I appreciate Dr. Orfield coming here and the Office of Civil Rights and so on, and doing the assessments that he's done on what's been happening in the Buffalo School District. But my point is that why are we spending all of our time going to these studies to tell us things that you already know? If we succeed in conquering the oral literacy problem, we will succeed in conquering the reading problem. If we succeed in conquering the reading problem, we will succeed fundamentally in conquering the reading or educational development problem, that people will begin to grow educationally at grade level or greater because we've solved the reading problem. There is no other way out of the wilderness. You have to do the hard work. In these studies, I'm going to make the call in just a second, the prevalence of reading disorder in children with language impairment ranges from 25 to 90%. Think about that. 1 out of 4, as many as 9 out of 10 of our children have a reading disorder, attributable to the limitations that these children have in both their ability to understand language and their phonological awareness. Phonological awareness deficits place them at risk for difficulties in learning, decoding skills, and the comprehension problems place them at risk for reading comprehension problems. If you have reading comprehension problems, it's impossible for you to be able to learn on your own, to study on your own, to acquire information by yourself from reading. Several studies have shown elevated rates of behavior problems among children with language impairment. The most common behavioral problems that have been reported are ADHD, attention deficit hyper attention disorder. However, internalizing problems such as anxiety disorder have also been reported. Some research has shown that these behavior problems appear to vary with the settings. In particular, they find that these problems manifest themselves when children are in classrooms, because it's in classrooms where your lack of oral literacy manifests itself in a way that becomes a conflict in the classroom. When you're in the community with me, if you only know 6 words, I'll just communicate with you in 6 words. We're still going to play basketball. But if you're in the classroom, 6 words doesn't work in the classroom, right? And so if I can't communicate with you, I'm a teacher, I'm trying to communicate with you, and I find I can't communicate with you, at some level, that's going to turn itself into a behavior, issue between me as a student and you as a teacher. Does that make sense? All right. Let me take our next call. We good? Okay. Hi, caller. Are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As usual, you give a lot of good information. It makes a lot of good sense. I just want to rethink a couple of things. One, in terms of reading, it's reading comprehension. I'm glad you brought that up because it's not just reading, it's comprehending what you read. The other, in terms of literacy is not just about reading words these days. It's about reading situations, about reading signs, reading symbols, especially on these devices we have. I know I'm very much illiterate in terms of these devices and some of the symbols that appear on your devices, how to navigate your way through them. But a lot of young people who've grown up with that are a lot more literate in terms of that technology than I am. Mm-hmm. But one of the things in terms of learning, in terms of learning, I think I want to say this about special education. I think every child deserves special education. We need to relabel that in terms of differently abled and special education, not just being people who are slower or have some sort of disability or different ability. But one of the things I learned late in life, and I wish I had learned it earlier, is the idea of when you're trying to study and learn, the science of never going past a word that you do not understand. Mm-hmm. Having a dictionary somewhere near you, because when you go past words that you don't understand and you just try to consume a certain number of pages that you've been assigned, you find yourself getting tired and lost and dozing off and not being involved in that learning process, not comprehending that process. So I just want to remind people and suggest to people always never go past a word that you're reading that you do not understand. Have a dictionary or some other sort of device near you, and then continue on your reading after you understand the word, because it's not just reading, it's reading and comprehension.
That's right. When you get to be a middle schooler, you should be competent enough to be able to stop and go look up a word that you don't know and get the understanding before you go on. Obviously, if you're in preschool, that's not going to be, the dictionary is not going to help you and whatnot. But we have to use the tools that are available to us at the age-appropriate levels as regularly and consistently as we can, because oral
and I guess I'm saying that, brother, in terms of lifelong learning, that as we go through this adult stage of our life, as we're learning and going through things, have that dictionary handy and don't necessarily accept what this says, but at least give some sort of guidance. I'm going to hang up and listen to some of the great information you're passing on, so God bless.
All right, thanks. So we should take let's take our last break, and then we'll finish up our subject. You all stick with us. We will send us out of the break here at Living Right Now.
Do you want to increase your home's value? Do you want to lower your energy bills? Are you in need of affordable financing for your next home improvement project? The CAO Home Improvement Resource Program can help. Just come to their monthly session every at the resources you need to get financed, and they'll even help you with completing your application. You won't know what you qualify for until you call them today at 881-6543. That's 881-6543. Learn about all the home improvement programs you may be eligible for and ask about the affordable financing program that can help turn your house into your dream home. Call 881-6543 for more info. It's the Home Improvement Resource Program, restoring value to neighborhoods across Erie County, one house at a time. Brought to you by the Community Action Organization of Erie County.
All right, here we go. Living Right Now. This is L. Nathan Hare, your host. We're here at Living Now at WFO Power 96.5 FM on your dial. We're here with Emmanuel Radford, who is doing the live streaming of the program. And so just getting to some of the conclusions here. It is, let me say it this way, the existence of a strong relationship between spoken language skills and subsequent reading and behavior development is generally supported by the literature. The relationship between early spoken language and later reading development is generally thought to be causal in nature. In other words, if you have good oral literacy, you are likely to be a good reader. If you have poor oral literacy, especially when you're younger, you are likely to be a poor reader. And as Kamal had talked about a little bit earlier, if you have not made reading fun for your children, if you've not made it a process where it was allowing you to be able to uncode or decode experiences that other people have had. I remember being 3 years old and I got a hold of Zane Grey's short stories, Pecos Bill, lassoing cyclones, I don't know, that sounds silly or whatnot, but when you're 3 years old, lassoing a cyclone sounds kind of cool, right? But the fact that I was able to go into these books and pull out stories that told me about Wyoming, that told me about oceans, that told me about other countries, told me about other people living in different circumstances, it allowed me to be able to explore. It allowed me to be able to get access to experiences that I could not possibly have gotten living on Hamburg and Perry Street, in Buffalo, New York. And so that's what reading does for you. It allows you to become the person who is able to acquire new information yourself and be able to take that information and integrate it into your own being and turn it into skill. And not just knowledge, but turn it into skill. And that enables you to become so much more competent in so many other endeavors. And then other people that know more things can sit what they know on top of the base that you know, and your ability to take your ability to read, to take the new learning that they're giving you and to build on it, sew it into that platform so that your platform of learning becomes bigger and bigger. This is what enables you to become a person who can be a advanced placement student in the 7th grade, where you're earning college credit, for courses when you're in the 7th grade. Now, how do you think these kids wind up being 16, 17, 18 years old and having their bachelor's degrees? I mean, the clock don't work any faster for them than it works for you, but because they've had good mastery of reading skills, they become better learners, and because they became better learners, they were able to learn more things more quickly at an earlier stage in their life. And so at 7th and 8th grade, they were able to take advanced placement courses, taking college credit courses. There are children who are taking an 8+8 program where they're doing 4 years of high school and 4 years of undergraduate school at the same time, because they're taking the same basic number of courses, but they're taking courses that are at the college level when they're still in high school, and they're getting credit for it. And guess who's paying for those college credits? Just as an aside, yeah, you're right. Your school district or your state is paying for those college credits. So essentially, this is affirmative action for the smart people. You just let that stick with you for just a second, okay? Because you're putting up money that essentially is paying for all or a portion of the undergraduate education of a public school child, and that cost is being paid for by the public. But who are the kids who get access to the program? The kids who had good reading and language development early in life. They become the ones who are good students in elementary school, and because they are really good students in elementary school, they become the ones who have access to early advanced placement courses when they're in middle school. So if you see that the vast majority of the people who are getting to take advantage of these advanced placement courses in middle schools are the people who are essentially the people that were already the elite, in your community. Essentially, you've got affirmative action for the elite. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Interventions are available for promoting language growth, and in particular, numerous programs exist that are designed to promote the development of phonological processing skills. So there are tools that are out here that can help us. Listening comprehension can be improved in the early school years. These methods focus on strengthening language skills. Additionally, intervention efforts need to consider approaches that provide adapted and supportive educational environments for those children to reduce the potential stressors that may result in maladaptive behaviors. In other words, when a child finds that they're disconnecting with their teachers and the other students who are able, literacy-wise able students in their classrooms, when they find themselves disconnected with them because they are so underdeveloped in terms of their language skills, instead of reacting to that as if, man, you're kind of dumb, I'm gonna have to put you over here with the slow kids, and making the child feel branded that you don't like the child or there's something wrong with the child, and the kinds of things that tend to turn the student away from the teacher. Instead of going that route, what you have to do is find ways to reintegrate that child into the education process. Find ways to enroll the child in activities that are going on in the classroom that you're using to provide age-appropriate education for the children, where that child who has poor language skills can become plugged in. Find ways to help that child be able to see and visualize what those words mean, how to say those words and what those words mean, and then celebrate their growth in their development of language ability, of oral literacy. If you do that, then the child is going to feel empowered by learning. They're going to feel excited by learning. They're going to feel that they're being self-actuated, that there's not something wrong with you. There's something right about you. People are investing in you. You're going to feel good about that. You're going to feel good that other kids in the class see you as somebody who is an able person, that you're not a dummy. You have capacity, and so on. And that is only going to reduce negative conflict inside the child and improve the child's attitude towards the child's education and the people that the child is being educated by and the people that the child is being educated with. That's the way that this has to go. I want to talk real quickly about this Pathways in Technology Early High School, or called P-TECH. A concern in this series of research and analysis is lifted up, that this analysis has lifted up, is that many school districts are structuring themselves to provide enhanced opportunities for those who already have enhanced opportunities, and that treat more disadvantaged students more as problems to be coped with rather than children that we have a really good chance of being able to be successful with. Students who come from households that are able to provide them with stability, life, and educationally enriching experiences, safety, and security tend to develop very high and robust preschool oral literacy. When they get to kindergarten, they are able to grow academically at a normal, if not accelerated rate. These are the students who most likely get into the Buffalo District's criteria schools or exam schools in the 5th grade. They track into the Leonardo da Vinci schools or the Olmsted or Hutch Tech schools or other criteria-based middle schools. These are the children who qualify for advanced placement courses as early as the 7th grade, get to take college credit earning courses whose tuition is paid for by the school district. It is essentially an affirmative action program to keep the already privileged willing to remain in the Buffalo public school system. There are other opportunities on the horizon, however. Brooklyn has a model that's referred to as the Pathways in Technology Early High School model, and it's getting attention in Buffalo. There's a school in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, that's working on a better educational model to prepare underserved children for college and the workforce. The school emphasizes science, technology, engineering, and math. Its partner, IBM, ensures that students have mentors, paid internships, and the skills they need for today's fast-changing economy. Not only do students graduate with a high school diploma, but they can leave with a 2-year college degree free of charge. And once they graduate, they're first in line for entry into jobs at IBM. When you know that if you work through this process, you're going to only have to spend 2 years in undergraduate school because you already get two of the years you got done while you were in high school, and maybe you get a little fellowship and whatnot to get into your graduate program, and you know you got a job waiting for you as an undergraduate completer, a bachelor's degree person. You know that you've got a job at IBM waiting for you. You're going to be a little bit more focused, just a little bit more confident that your life is going to work out, right? And so that's what IBM is doing in this model. Well, that's a part of what has to be done. If you're in one of these European countries, they basically track, their students. We got about 3 minutes. They track their students into companies in those countries, so when you get done with your undergraduate education, you got a spot that's waiting for you in a company in that country. We have to do similar kinds of things. We can't just leave people hanging out, in the street, leaving it up to them to find their way by themselves. We need to provide some pathways for them. If you decide you don't want to go to IBM, nobody's going to be mad, but boy, you're going to be glad if you know you got a good opportunity waiting for you when you get done with your college education. And so students graduate with the once hailed by former President Barack Obama as the ticket into the middle class. This P-TECH model is being replicated across the United States, and the next stop might be in Buffalo. This is an article from Wired Focus that appeared on May 26th of this year. The Pathways in Technology Early High School board member Larry Quinn has been spearheading the effort of trying to bring the P-TECH model into Buffalo. The key to this is the private sector partnership with education. The concept was born from the so-called skills gap that U.S. employers have encountered. It's a 6-year high school program that opened in 2011 with six key tenets: a partnership with higher education and private industry, no entrance exam, not like we have at Hutch Tech that Immanuel U, City Honors people, with your exams and whatnot. No entrance exam. Seamless support for students to earn their high school diploma and associate's degree in 6 years. A workplace component including mentoring, job visits, and paid fellowships. The associate's degree is free. That's 2 years of college for free. Graduates are first in line for entry level employment with their industry partners. In this case, it was for the Brooklyn School, it was IBM. So the Brooklyn High School, which has more than 560 students, the majority of whom are African Americans and males, they have a 78% graduation rate, 91% graduation rate, 78% that go on to get their undergraduate degrees. Listen, that's all we can talk about today. I appreciate all of you guys' participation. Look forward to talking to you again next week here at Living Now, Living Right Now.
Thank